Good evening and welcome to Realty Coffee Talk on Awaz Entertainment in Canada around the world. My name is Tahir Qureshi. I am your host tonight. Today we're going to talk about leasing application or rental application and lease agreement, how the process works, and so you will learn what information is necessary for you to provide to make a successful residential tenancy agreement. Before we begin, it is very important to understand that when people have a challenge in purchasing or affordability is an issue of buying a property, even though we have a very lowest interest rate in the market, people tend to go and lease the property because they have no choice. It's an essential segment. Either you buy it or you rent it, and you have to get a shelter for your family. So how they go about it? As you know, you enter into an agreement, a buying representation agreement for purchase or lease with a real estate professional, real estate agent, and a listing brokerage. It's the same process you follow, working with a realtor, then also having a buyer representation agreement to purchase or lease. It's the same process. So when you have done that, you already now in the process of looking for property. So you work with your realtor, he search around the property based on your capacity and affordability. They define the area. Are they going to rent a condominium unit or a basement or a fully detached home, townhome, or semi-detached? So based on your information that you provided, it was chosen that you're going to work with a realtor to help you find a property for rental. So there are a couple of steps that we have to do. The most important thing for you is we call a rental application for residential. Since we are talking to consumers, so that's primarily our focus is to help residential, our consumer to understand that. OREA, Ontario Real Estate Association, has a standard form. It's called 410. It's a rental application for residential. So most important thing is that it's a declaration from the potential tenant, and he or she has to provide this information to the realtor, and this is shared with the landlord or the listing brokerage, and to start the process. So basically, it will tell you when do you want to commence your lease. You have a name and date of birth, and SIN number is an optional, and driver license for the person whose name will be on the lease agreement. So if you have a wife and your spouse, whoever is adult occupying the property, the name is specified. Then you have a number of dependents, because there are some restrictions in terms of condominium. The number of children can live in a rental property. So make sure that you provide the relationship and age of the children or dependent living with you. Then you, for verification purposes, do you have pets? Even though law does not prohibit people having pet or restrict the pet for ownership to bring into the house, particularly when you have in a residential home where you have a landlord is living on the upstairs and the tenant living in the basement, is a legal basement, and somebody may have an allergy to cat or dog. That is why this declaration is very, very important. Some people, sometimes they talk about why would they have to, I have a small dog, tiny dog, or big cat, blah, blah, blah. But they don't understand the complexity involved, because if if it's a second dwelling, for example, where landlord is living upstairs and the tenant living downstairs, the ventilation system is the same. So the air, the hair of the animal circulates. So this is a health hazard for some people. So this is why it's very important not to insist too much, or after signing the agreement, bring animal, because you may have to be evicted through the very lengthy process of residential tribunal, because it takes time and you may hurt somebody. So this is why it's very important to disclose that. And if you are leasing, leaving some other property to come to this property, so this application will tell you, why were you leaving the existing property and coming to this property? So this information is vital for this. So sometimes you are selling your property and you're going into a rental. You may have to use this money for business purposes, or you are relocating, or you're because of the job. For whatever reason that you have, it has to have a good reason for, because this will help the new landlord to determine whether he or she will allow you or not. So last two places of residence, you have to provide the duration, how long you've been there, the address, and name of the landlord, and telephone number. This is very important because especially right now in COVID environment, when people are living or they're leasing, they know that if you give wrong information and stop paying the payment, it will be a burden, because some landlord may not survive, not having the money coming to them they need for survival of their ownership and living in that property. So it's very, very important for them to have. So this information, when it's provided, the listing agent, real estate agent, will call the landlord, or the landlord will call himself or herself to verify the information that you have. Mostly when it's done through the realtors, we always check and verify to make sure the right information is provided to us. Then you have a present employment. Why this is information important? To verify that you are working, you are making, you're providing an address, you're providing a name, and your position that you had, and the length of your employment. This is very, very important to find out. If you don't provide this information, the potential landlord will refuse your application because they not feel comfortable. Sometimes they will require a job. If you have a longer employment, it is good for you because it will show that you've been there for a long period of time, you have a good relation, and landlord is selling, and that's the reason that you have to move. Also, when you have a job, employment, you have to identify your supervisor name. So instead of wasting too much time, the realtor that is representing the seller, landlord, they can go and call the supervisor to find out, and most likely we will require an employment letter. And then you have a current monthly salary. This is normally a gross salary. Idea is to figure out how much money that you are making, and between you and your spouse, and how much is the rent. Can you handle it? Because your rent to income ratio, if it's high, affordability become an issue. Now, as you can see, this is very, very important that we have this information for you. So now, once you have done this information, we also have to check to make sure the information that you have provided is correct. Same thing, information you provide for your spouse, and you also have a current employer and previous employer, two employer. This information. Now, bank information. If you have a certain bank amount in your account, to make sure it's a checking or saving, you have the money in that account. Sometimes we demand give us a bank statement to show that, because sometimes you have a new landed immigrant coming in and they have the capacity to give you 3 months, 6 months rental because they don't have too much references here. So this demonstrates that you will be able to show that amount that you have. And most importantly, not only do you have a rental, you also find out what are other obligations you have. For example, student loans, car payments, or any other commitment that you have made, you are paying monthly. And that's why it's very important. And this is why you have to complete this form. So basically, landlord is trying to see you are employed, you have moved from another landlord to this rental, and you are financially okay, you have a current job, you both spouse and you have a good job, you have a good earning. There is no reason to be concerned about it. And then you also have no big financial obligations that create a different financial ratio for you, income versus rental, where you can afford and reasonably live in the house. And the other thing is then you will provide personal references. If there is a shortage of references, personal references, people that don't know you as a person, that you've been living there, you have visited there because you have provided the information that you are, you know him for a while. And this is why it's very important for you to provide the personal information. And contact name and number, and send what type of make and model of your vehicle you're driving. It shows that how financially capable you are if you own your property, because some residences will require a self-driven vehicles, car, truck, to go to work. So therefore, they want to find out if you are renting a particular property out of the city and you don't have a mean of transportation, then what will happen? So this is very, very important. Then also, you need to give consent. There's a form there that you are consenting the landlord and the authorized representative landlord to verify the information, check to verify all this information, and then spouse and the tenant, future tenant will sign the application and put a date on it and phone number. So this is why it's very, very important that when you are working with a realtor, real estate agent, please complete this form, URIA form 410, and complete as much accurate information. And this is also important for you, that once you provide more complete information, it will help your case when securing a lease agreement or residential tenancy agreement. So this is why very important. Now, when you have chosen the property or when you are entering into a lease agreement, then we have a couple of choices. Under the Residential Tenancy Act, in April 2018, the Ontario government mandated that you use residential tenancy agreement, standard form of lease, as an instrument for entering into an agreement, residential lease agreement. We are conventionally, as a real estate profession, use Form 400, which is agreement to lease residential. The both are the same. You can use either one of them. But the important thing is that you may have to do both of them, because this has a specific requirement that you enter. So in case you decide to do Ontario agreement to lease, which is Form 400, and then you can incorporate that to that residential tenancy agreement of the Ontario government. So basically, when you are entering an agreement of purchase and sale, similarly, you have to enter an agreement to lease. This has a very specific information that we talk about, again, effective date or commencement date of this agreement. Then you are talking about the tenant who is going to be on the lease. Most cases you will have adult income producing individuals. They will be put on as a tenant. And especially if you are having a adult son or daughter married and living together. So that's basically two families, wife and husband, for the child, and also yourself. as a mother and father and husband and wife. So you will have four people signing this lease agreement because there are two families, not a single family, unless dependents are children. Landlord, of course, whoever owns the property could be an individual, could be a corporation, and then address of the landlord, which is the property that you are leasing. So then we have a premises, we identify them. What are the premises that you are going to lease it? And what is the term of the lease? How long they're going to be leased? And the rental, how much is rental per month you pay? And then you also have a deposit. Sometimes your first and last month deposit you have to pay. Remember that when you're working with the realtor, the deposit go to listing brokerage and they deposit into real estate trust account until the transaction is completed. That means the day you take possession, and the commencement date is the date of your lease agreement. You can negotiate a deal, but you can specify a commencement date and expiration date. Normal leases are for 1 year, and it depends if there are renewal options there, and sometimes a long-term lease. Depends on it. A Residential Tenancy Act will control the rental increase on an annual basis, which can be put in a clause in the agreement to include that. But this is why it's very important. And deposit prepaid. So basically you pay first month rental and you pay last month rental. It is not required by law to give any deposit, post-ready checks, because of the coronavirus and electronic transfer of funds, EFT. Now you can monthly transmit the information, money to the landlord's account at the first day of the month, the day that commencement normally is first calendar day of each month. Then you can transfer that. So this is the arrangement that you negotiate in this agreement, and you identify what is included and what is not included. Now, you specify the amount, and then use of property. It's very, very important. When you are renting a property for residential use, you have to specify this is for residential use. Does not permit you to sublease to somebody else, because if in this case, if owner is living upstairs and you're living downstairs, then you have to very carefully talk to the seller, to the landlord, in case you decide to move out. And there are some restrictions and protocol that you have to deal with when ejecting a tenant. We're going to talk about the only leasing. So then you have a tenant and landlord agree to the location, the size of the lease agreement, and what is the use of the property. Then what are the costs associated with the services? You know, you have a gas, some has oil, some has electricity, hot water tanks, rental, water sewer charges, and the cable, condominium fees, garbage removal, these kind of stuff. There are blocks on our Form 400 where you can click that which is included or not included, because it will affect the cost of that rental per month. And this is for residential only. So then you have parking. Is the property that is being rented, for example, is a condominium, you have a unit, it has a one exclusive parking. It may not have a two parking. So this is the thing that you have to check. And then lockers, sometimes they have a locker, they don't have a locker, or maybe landlord wants to use the locker for themselves. So this is why it's very important that you have to find, that. Any additional terms that you want to add to it. And schedule that you attach. Schedule A normally talks about the use of the premises, and they are well defined. A long list of things that you have to do. Don't make any repair changes. Don't paint the property without consent. Repair of the property, use of the parking lot. Many options they are specified in the Schedule A in tenancy. The purpose is of the Residential Tenancy Act is to protect the landlords and as well as tenants' rights, especially in coronavirus environment. We have Ontario lockdown. Eviction doesn't exist, particularly because you can't do that under the situation. So if you have a challenge, his idea is to talk to the tenant and talk about it. We're going to talk at the end. Irrevocably, so when you create an offer, you send it to the listing brokerage, and your valid is good for a certain period of time, and then after that it will expire unless it's accepted. Then you also have a notices, when you're giving notices through your real estate agent, normally listing agent now and myself also, we are all using now email. Fax, nobody uses, very rare case. So you can identify the name of your realtor's email and to receive a notice. And this is why it's very important to have that notice information in their document. So when they are officially transmitting, you are allowing the realtors to transmit the information notification to you through that system. Execution of the lease. When execution of the lease is accepted, that means the day the terms and conditions are accepted, that is the day this will be the only document that's executed between you and landlord, tenant and landlord. And both of them need to acknowledge that they have received a true, fully executed copy of the lease agreement as a final. Access, you have to provide access to landlord by giving an adequate notice, normally 24 hours, to access the property for repair or for assessment, financing, insurance, or whatever need for it, or even for the sale. So this is where you agree to give this access to the landlord. Insurance, the building insurance is maintained by the landlord, whereas content insurance of the tenant has to be done by you. You have to provide that evidence of the insurance. This can be included in Schedule A. Residency. So the landlord, they are entering into this agreement and they're going to use it for a personal residency, not to get involved with third party. So this is for residential use. So there is a defined, and also residency means the person who is moving in or who is leasing out are residents of Ontario under Income Tax Act RS 19885. So this is why, because non-residents may have to pay some taxes on the acquisition, on the leasing of this property. So it's very, very important that you do that. Use and distribution of personal information. Whatever information that you furnish to the listing brokerage will be used for verification of information to make sure that you are the right person. And since you have provided the credit report, Equifax or TransUnion, they know that you have a good record. But this is the consent between a tenant and landlord to use this information. Conflict of discrepancy. This is the document. Sometimes you have a negotiation going through your realtors that you want this, you expect this. But once you sign this lease agreement, this becomes a only document that can be used for any discrepancy, conflict, and discrepancy. This is the final document. Family law, the landlord warns that the spousal consent is not required. So this is again because you are not selling the property, but if the property is owned, it's not a matrimonial home, it's an investment property, then consent is not required. If the property is matrimonial prime residence, then spousal consent is required. So consumer report, tenant is hereby notified to a consumer report containing credit card and personal information may be referred to connection with transaction. So this is the consent that the tenant is giving to the landlord, that if you give information, we will verify your credit report or credit information. This is you have given the authority to use that under the Act. So this is a binding agreement. It is when you submit an offer to lease, this is signed by the tenant or authorized representative. Then buyer, landlord, or or landlord representative will accept, will sign that, and then there is a confirmation of acceptance. Sometimes you'll counter back and forth. If the tenant counter the final, then landlord will accept it. If landlord counter the final, then then the tenant will accept it. This is very, very important. Sometimes I've seen the mistakes of people that they are offering and accepting the same document. It's happened when somebody brought to me 6 years ago a accepted agreement of purchase and sale, offer issued by the buyer and accepted by the buyer. So therefore, there was no agreement, and they were trying to go into threatening each other for litigation, and the agreement did not exist. So this is very, very important when you're doing a counter. Make sure if you are a tenant and you put a tenant offer from you, if the seller landlord counter it, make sure the landlord cross the tenant and put landlord, and then you as a tenant, potential tenant, can accept that. This is very important. Same thing for buyer and seller. Then you also have in this document a date and time when the offer has been accepted and signed by the tenant or landlord, depending who is receiving the counter. Normally, one signature is enough, but if you want to have all sign it, that's good enough. Then you have a broker information. It identify the listing broker and the authorized representative of the broker with a phone number. And similarly, for the cooperating broker or for the tenant, then the broker's name and the name of the realtor is helping you. And then obviously, there is always confusion about acknowledgement. Please note this agreement. I'm going to read you acknowledgement. And if you are even buying and selling or lease agreement, I want you to pay attention. I'm going to read from the form. I acknowledge receipt of my signed copy of the accepted agreement to lease, and I authorize the broker to forward a copy to my lawyer. Accepted agreement of lease. This is why it's very, very important that you have to make sure that you have accepted this agreement of lease. Viewers, you are watching Realty Coffee Talk on Awaz Entertainment in Canada, around the world. We're going to take a short break and then we'll come back. Realty Coffee Talk on Awaz Entertainment. My name is Tahir Qureshi. I'm your host, and we continue our conversation of rental application and residential lease agreement.
Fine Foods, now open in Barhaven area, Ottawa. Pick up or dine in. Also available on Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, and DoorDash.
दो 2020 का लाजवाब ऑफर, जहां हम 0% फाइनेंसिंग पर आपकी मनपसंद कार दे रहे हैं, फ्री विंटर टायर्स, और साथ ही हम मुफ्त ऑयल चेंज भी दे रहे हैं, वो भी उम्र भर के लिए। अभी आएं और इस लाजवाब ऑफर का लुत्फ लें। जल्दी करें, आपका खुशामदीद हमारे आउटलेट में, जो कि 60 क्वींस प्लेट ड्राइव एट इंटरसेक्शन क्लोज टू हाईवे 27, and Rexdale opposite to Woodbine Racetrack। जल्द से जल्द इस ऑफर का लुत्फ लें। आज ही कॉल करें सुनील अग्रवाल को 647-703-0218। डिक्सी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स और अप्लायंसेस पिछले 16 सालों से खरीदारों की खिदमत कर रहे हैं। हम लगातार 4 सालों से खरीदारों की पहली पसंद बने रहने का अवार्ड हासिल कर चुके हैं। हम किचनर्स, बॉश, वर्लपूल, एलजी, सैमसंग और जनरल इलेक्ट्रिक के ऑथराइज्ड डीलर हैं। 5 स्टार खिदमत का लुत्फ लें। हम आप सभी को टीवी सबसे ज्यादा रियायती दामों पर देने की गारंटी देते हैं। www.dixieelectronics.ca हमारी वेबसाइट पर जाएं या अभी कॉल करें 905-625-5900। सभी बहुत ही मुनासिब कीमत पर दस्तयाब हैं जो आप आसानी से ले सकते हैं। At Dixie, we sell quality and deliver confidence.
4 बजे देखिए आपका किचन विद शहबाज गोरी। सुबह 5 बजे देखिए सितारे और हम। 5:30 बजे देखिए मैसेज ऑफ मर्सी। शाम 6 बजे देखिए दीन और दुनिया। इस्लाम इन मॉडर्न टाइम मजर अयूब के साथ देखिए हर मंगल शाम 6 बजे और हर जुमा शाम 5 बजे। थिंक अबाउट इट सलमान कुरैशी के साथ हर मंगल शाम 7 बजे। रियल्टी कॉफी टॉक ताहिर कुरैशी के साथ देखिए हर जुमेरात 7 बजे। टुनाइट टॉक रिजवान असलम के साथ हर जुमे को 7 बजे। देखिए तकरार कीजिए तकरार समीना जबीन के साथ रोज रात 9 बजे। आप देख रहे हैं आवाज एंटरटेनमेंट, आवाज आपकी, चैनल हमारा, जुड़िए हमसे।
Good evening and welcome to Realty Coffee Talk on Awaz Entertainment in Canada around the globe. My name is Tahir, Qureshi. I'm your host. We're talking about rental application and rental lease agreement. We were about to finish our agreement on lease agreement, Form 400. If bottom of the form, you will see that if you feel not comfortable, you will be able to send your lease to offer, agreement of lease to your lawyer and get their opinion if you feel that you need their opinion. Before you take a position, obviously, when it's accepted, this lease agreement becomes a legal document and you go through the process. If you have a condition, sometime you will have a condition to complete a Ontario government lease agreement, residential tenancy agreement. So it could become a condition that within few days you will transpose this all information into this agreement. Therefore, it has to be done. Sometimes the landlord will need a time to check and review the credit history of the tenant. Therefore, they need some time. At the bottom, so this is why it's very important to have those conditions Schedule A to make sure that you're not abusing the property. You're going to follow the proper protocol, the various conditions regarding deposit, regarding repair of the building, anything you have to do with the property. Those are customized conditions that you have to define. What chattel do you provide? This is why very important for you to, if you are working with a realtor, we're going to go to the Ontario Residential Tenancy Agreement. Before we do that, so at the bottom of the page, there will be a commission trust agreement. That means listing broker will cooperate with the cooperating broker to compensate for the services being offered on MLS, and that's where it's signed. So this will complete with Schedule A, various condition agreement. Now, this is very important for you. When you are leasing this property, you have to find out there is a checklist form 823, and you want to find out as a realtor what is included, what is not included. For example, you fill this form, it talks about the property and salesperson, broker record, a date you visit, is a client, customer, consumer, whatever the name. So fixture chattel is owned, rented, or leased. Amount assumable, contract terms, for example, water tank, is it owned or is rented or is leased? How much is the money? Same thing is furnace. If it's rented or leased, who's going to pay for that? Water softener, if there is one, is leased, owned. What is the amount? Is it assumable? So this is very important. Air conditioner, alarm system. Lots of people have signed alarm system which connect with the land. And you take position, you have an alarm system in the house. You think it's fully paid, but it's not. It was rented. So those why it's very important to have a disclosure for that. Then you have a heat pump. In some building, we have a heat pump. Then any other item that has to be part of the lease agreement has to be specified. So use this form 823, Korea Form 823, to find out the facts about the property. So this is why it's very, very important for you to understand this. Believe me, it is as lengthy as you're buying a property. The effort of a realtor or real estate agent working with you will be spending same time if he or she was helping you to buy a property. So for responsibility, dealing with the complexity, detailed investigation, due diligence is incredible. It's the same as residential, but you're not buying it, you are leasing it. And this is why you have to hire a realtor to help you with it. Now, in terms of residential tenancy agreement, there is a guideline. It's called Form 2229E, 2018 January. It's a very comprehensive document. It tells you what is required. I'm going to give you, for example, when this form is to be used, change of landlord, if the ownership changes from the landlord, renewing a tenancy agreement, Part 5 of the Act, when renewing a tenancy agreement, what the details are. It talks about you're a monthly rental or month to month, or you are renewing long term. Ending of the tenancy, the Part 5 of the Act that deal with it. When the tenancy will end, it's very important. And you have a 60 days notice if they have monthly or fixed term tenancy, or at least 28 days notice if they are a daily. So if you are a daily or weekly rental, then you need 28 days notice. But if you are on a monthly lease or tenancy term, it's 60 days notice. When the landlord can end the tenancy. So these are the guidelines. I want you to download this, very important. Then Section E talks about giving notices and documents, Section Part 12 of the Act. And these has to be hand delivered or left in the mailbox or place where mail is ordinarily delivered and mailed. This will be counted as a delivered 5 days after mailing. So then is the number F is a rent and rent receipts. When you are collecting the rent and you're giving the receipt. This is very important. Rent discounts, if there are any discounts that you're offering. This guideline, Section 7 of the Act, will explain you what is, if there is a free period that you are offering to a tenant, it has to be specified. So these are the guidelines I'm reading to you. And the Section H talks about deposit, which is Part 7 of the Act. It talks about landlord can only collect a deposit for the last month's rent and a refundable key deposit. The tenant does not have to provide any other form of deposit, such as pet or damage deposit. If the tenant pays anything more, the tenant can apply to the Landlord Tenancy Act to get the money back. See, only last month rent and key deposit, which is refundable. You cannot take no other deposit, no post-dated checks. But if you are agreeing into an agreement between tenant and landlord that you both consent to do it, then that's okay, but it's not required. You know, we put terms, give us a 10 deposits, checks, post-dated checks. It's not required by law. But if you agree to it, then it's okay. Then rent increase and decrease, Part 7 of the Act. It says the most intelligent tenants are protected by rent control that limit how much rent can increase year over year. The rent payable by the tenant may also decrease in limited situations. So guidelines rent increases are issued by the Ontario government for 12 months. And those you cannot exceed. If the rent increase above the guideline, you have to justify the reason why you are increasing the rent. And if you disagree with it, you can go to Landlord and Tenants Board, Tenant Board, to challenge that and oppose that increased rental. Some of the property taxes is increased, snow removal costs more money, management, repair, there is extra expense that is done by the landlord, therefore they want to recover that money. So now, some situation will happen, the tenant's rent will be reduced, municipal property tax goes down. Let's assume your residential taxes go down. That could be one reason that you might have to reduce your rent, and it has to be more than 2.49% property tax reduction. I haven't seen any property tax reduction for a while. Never seen it because so far the property value has gone up. I think municipal property tax impact will be issuing a new tax for the next 4 years. So then J is a maintenance and repair. These are the guidelines that you have to download from Ontario government website, and part 3, 4, 5, and 14 of the Act that talks about to keep the rental unit in property in good repair and commonly with healthy, safe, and maintaining healthy safety standard. Maintenance standard, that means when you rent the property, that doesn't mean that you ignore the fact that something is deteriorating and you need to fix it. You're supposed to maintain that. A law requires that you do it. And for example, you have a common areas and mostly covered by condominium, where the condominium fee covers everything. So this is the responsibility of the landlord to make sure things are taken care of. So K, Section K is Vital Services, Part 1 and 3 of the Act. The vital services include hot or cold water, fuel, electricity, gas, and heat. This is your responsibility that this is provided. In case a bill is not paid, you have to make sure you pay the bill, you can claim it, but you make sure this information is provided to the tenant. So this is a very clear guidelines. And H, L, harassment, Section 3 and 4 of the Act. It is against the law of the landlord or any acting for the landlord, such as superintendent or property manager, to harass the tenant. You cannot harass a tenant, or for the tenant to harass the landlord. Tenant cannot harass the landlord. If the landlord or tenant is experiencing harassment, they can apply to the landlord and tenant board. That means if harassment is prohibited, either landlord or tenants, they cannot do that. If they have a problem, they will report to landlord and tenant board. Discrimination, you cannot discriminate anyone. Then you have a number N, which is landlord's entry into rental unit. There are requirements specifically, 24-hour notice, make repair, inspect the unit for repair or for leasing purposes, real estate agent, and other purpose of tenancy. To make sure you are comfortable, the important thing is to cooperate with people. And being a future tenant for this property that you put an offer on, you are understanding that you're going to help. So the other one is locks. You cannot change the lock without the permission of the landlord. And make sure you have a key of it. Assignment or sublet, Section 6 of the Act, the tenant may assign or sublet the rental unit to another person only with the consent of the landlord. You cannot sublease a rent without the consent of the landlord. The landlord cannot arbitrarily or unreasonably withhold consent to potential assignee of the unit. So this is standard clause. Then we talk about PET, Part 3 of the Act. Tenants agreement cannot prohibit animals in the rental unit or any around the residential building. There are some cases where the landlord can apply to the landlord and tenant board to evict a tenant as a pet. These are common example. Pet makes too much noise, damage the unit, or causes tenants to have allergies reaction. Remember I mentioned that before? one time I remember I was assisting a landlord where the person brought 3 dogs into the property, and the landlord's daughter has an allergy. They have to produce document, went to the board, and they evicted them. Smoking is also Section 5 of the Act, talks about substantially interferes with the reasonable enjoyment of the landlord or other. So smoking is prohibited in most cases now, and enjoyment, because you have a same ventilation system is circulate is very bad for your health. So cause undue damage and a repair safety or other issues. Smoke and carbon monoxide alarm has to be installed in all units, and also resolving dispute. If you have a dispute or issue, you approach landlord and tenant board to resolve dispute. So this is the guidelines for Residential Tenancy Act. So I'm going to, we're getting close to our program. So I would recommend that you will go to the Ontario government website and download this form. Is 2229E 2018-1. It's called Residential Tenancy Agreement, Standard Form of Lease. This tenancy agreement is required for tenancy entered into on April 30, 2018 or later. So if you are entering into any lease agreement for residential tenancy, you have to use this form. So this is very important. And this does not apply to care homes, site and mobile home, parks and land lease, community, more social housing, certain other. So basically, it is saying where you can use that. Residency in Ontario are governed by the Residency Act of 2006. This agreement cannot take away a right or responsibility under the Residency Act of 2006. Under the Ontario Human Rights Code, everyone has the right to equal treatment in housing without discrimination or harassment. All sections of this agreement are mandatory and cannot be changed. So that means you go through the process and complete this form. So there are 3 steps. You have a residential application for rental. Then you have a lease. You have a checklist. Then you have a lease agreement. If you want to use Ontario Form 400, but then you have to convert it to residency tenancy agreement, or you can do residency tenancy agreement. If you complete the process, you give the deposit, go to those trust account of the listing brokerage, and on the day, and you may have an inspection clause in your Schedule A of the lease agreement, and you can go and visit and check that once you are given deposits, and then you take possession, you're satisfied with inspection, and you take over the house. They will give you key, and then you are responsible to maintain that property in accordance with your lease agreement or residential agreement that you signed between the party. Rental increases are controlled by the Ontario government. They will let you know maximum how much they can rent. Even if it's not in the clause in the agreement of lease, you still can apply for the renewal of your agreement. If the person pays rent properly and they want to renew, you can renew the contract, or you can go to month. It's all choice between you, or you amend the agreement to extend the period of the agreement. I hope you have understanding of the leasing process. You're watching Realty Coffee Talk and Awaz Entertainment every Thursday at 7 p.m. And I hope that you have been very careful during this lockdown in Ontario because of second wave of coronavirus. We pray for the safety of all citizens. We are thankful, we appreciate our health professional workers, medical doctors, nurses, paramedic, police officers, and our army protecting our fellow citizens and providing health and services. May God bless you all. May God bless Canada. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next Thursday at 7 p.m. on Awaz Entertainment, Realty Coffee Talk around the world. Thank you.